Cauliflower curry and spiced rice is one of my favorite quick dinners to make at home. It's full of flavor, full of veggies, and it comes together rather quickly. So what I'm going to use today is some onions, bell peppers, cauliflower, zucchini, cilantro, ginger, and garlic. So I am first going to start cutting up my onions. I'm using red onions, but you can also use white onions or even yellow onions, Vidalia onions, any type of onion. I'm using this because this is what I have on hand. So I'm going to first peel off the waxy outer skin, and I'm going to slice through my onions, not all the way through the tip. The tip helps hold it all together if you keep that root tip in place. And I'm cutting my onions in a small to medium dice, not super fine. You want them to still have some structure after being cooking in a pot for 20 minutes. I also am going to cut up some bell peppers for my recipe. I like to use the sweeter variety, so here I'm using a red bell pepper. I also have a yellow bell pepper that I'm also going to use for the curry. This red one is going into our rice. And you can see that I'm cutting it about the same size as I cut my onions. And the reason for that is that you want them to cook about the same time consistently. You don't want to cut your bell peppers too small because you don't want them turning into mush while you're cooking your rice. So after I get those cut up, I'm going to just put them in the same container with my onions. They're going to go in the pot together. Now for this recipe, it is vegetarian, and we are substituting our meat actually with, normally I put two different things in here. I'll put some garbanzo beans, which I don't have on hand, but I do have cauliflower, and that's the second thing I use to give my, this is almost used to bring structure and meatiness to the dish. And I'm cutting them rather large, about 1 inch in diameter. And the reason for that is, like I said, you want them to have structure. You don't want them just to be mushy once it's been cooking in the curry sauce. And once I have them cut up, I'm also going to put them to the side. We're going to add those into our curry. And I'm also going to prep up some fresh herbs. Herbs bring great aromatics to our rice, so we want to use some of these stems actually in our stock that we're going to put into our rice. I am going to dice up the stems small. I want them to break down, and because the rice is cooking so long, it will do that nicely. I'm also going to take the tops of the cilantro and dice those up rather small, and I'm going to use those in the curry as well as garnish for our rice. Now I'm going to go get some ginger, and if I had garlic, I would also cut that up, but I don't, so I'm going to be using garlic powder instead of garlic cloves. So I'm going to first take off the waxy paper off the ginger by using the back of my knife. I'm just using the dull side to scrape that down and cutting off any hard bits off the nubs, and then I'm going to slice and dice this into a fine mince. You want to make sure that your ginger is pretty small. Same thing with your garlic. You don't want big chunks of it in your dish. It doesn't taste. It's rather spicy, I think, and that's why I try to cut it as small as I can so I don't really taste it. But it gives good flavor and good aromatics to the dish. Now that I have the ginger, I'm going to put that aside, and that's going to go both in our curry and our rice. Now I love using whatever is in season for this curry. So right now it's summertime, so I have tons of zucchini that are growing in the garden. I'm sure like every a farmer or local gardener has the same problem in the summertime. You're busting out the seams with zucchini and you don't know what to do with it. Well, this is a great way of using that summer zucchini. So I'm going to dice this up about 1 inch in diameter. I wanted it about the same size as my cauliflower because these are going in this pot at the same time for cooking. And I went ahead and peeled the skin off because I find that sometimes with squashes and zucchinis, if you don't do that, they just cook inconsistently, where by the time you cook that outer skin, you cook the center to mush, and I don't want to do that for this dish. So I've just went ahead and peeled them with a vegetable peeler. So I'm putting those to the side with the cauliflower, which is going to go in our curry. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut up that other bell pepper that I'm going to be using in the curry, because I didn't do that earlier when I cut up the red one. I usually try to do all my peppers at the same time, but I'm trying to videotape this time to see if I can share some of my at-home recipes with you guys. So anyway, I'm going to cut this up real quick, and about the same size as I did the last time, the same size as my onions. Oh, and I just realized I didn't cut up my other onion for the curry. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to adjust my camera over to the pot. I have preheated my cast iron Dutch oven over medium-high heat. It's nice and warm, so now I'm adding in my coconut oil, and I'm going to melt my coconut oil down and heat it up before I add in my vegetables, which is 1 pepper and 1 onion. I'm going to slightly coat all of those onions and peppers with the coconut oil we just melted, and we're going to cook that for 5 minutes. We are then going to bloom our spices. What I mean by blooming is we are going to release the oils and natural aromatics of our spices by adding them to oil and cooking them for a few minutes. So there's residual coconut oil on the bottom of my cast iron Dutch oven, and I've freely poured all the spices listed there. I will have the spice measurements listed below in the description box for you. But for me, I've done this recipe so many times I could just eyeball it and it turns out great every time. So I noticed when I was stirring in my spices into my coconut oil that it absorbed a lot of the coconut oil. So I'm going to just add another 2 tablespoons to get it nice and coated, because it gets rather pasty when you first add all those spices. And now I'm adding my rice in, and I'm also going to coat the rice with the coconut oil as well as all of the other spices and vegetables. And we're going to brown our rice for about 2 minutes before we add in liquid. So I am also going to add in ginger and cilantro stems into my pot. I'm going to stir those around, scraping the bottom. And we are going to deglaze all of that with some veggie stock. So I'm going to use a whole quart. And I used about 2 cups of brown or jasmine rice to about 1 quart of veggie stock. And I scraped the bottom, made sure I got all the brown bits. I'm going to cover that, and I'm going to bring it to a simmer. And it's going to cook for about 20 minutes. Here I went ahead and moved it to the front burner so I had better visuals on the second Dutch oven where we're going to make our curry. So I've preheated the Dutch oven. I've added my coconut oil, which I'm melting over medium heat, and I'm going to make sure it's nice and hot before I start adding in my onions and my bell peppers. This recipe begins very similar to how we started our rice. We are going to saute our onions and peppers in a little bit of coconut oil. We're going to get them nice and translucent and a little bit of brown on the edges, and then we're going to bloom our spices in the residual coconut oil. So here I've added my onions. They're starting to cook, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my bell peppers, and we're going to fast forward about 5 minutes, and we're going to then add in our spice blend. Our spice blend is very similar to our spice blend that we used for the rice. So we're going to add in some tikka masala. We're also going to add in some curry powder. We're going to add smoked paprika. Smoked paprika is my favorite to use because it brings so much more dimension and smokiness to the curry. And we're also going to add cumin, onion powder, and garlic powder. And we're going to make sure that we start stirring our spices up, and we're getting them nice and coated with the coconut oil. We're going to cook this for about a minute and then also add in our ginger, and we're also going to deglaze. This time we're going to use some tomatoes. I used crushed tomatoes, but you can also use tomato sauce or diced tomatoes. We're going to scrape the brown bits, and then we're also going to add in coconut milk. Coconut milk brings nice and creamy texture to the curry. It also gives it a little bit of sweetness as well. We are going to continue to stir and warm that up till it's almost simmering, and then now we're ready to pop in our fresh veggies. So you can also pop in any vegetable that you like. You can put mushrooms in here, peas in here, and like I said, if you have beans, I normally add garbanzo beans to this. So now it's time to cover it and bring it to a simmer with a bay leaf. Forgot the bay leaf. Bring it to a simmer covered for about 15 minutes, and you should have nice tender chunks of cauliflower. And while that cooks, your rice is done. So here's my rice. You can see that it needs fluffed. So we're going to get a fork and fluff up those little specks of rice, release it from the side as much as we can. And you can see it's nice and moist. If it doesn't glisten and there's not moisture in your rice, 2 things. You can add a little bit of veggie stock, or you can even add a little bit of coconut oil right on top and just toss it in. It smells really good, and it's ready to be served. So for us, we just like to serve it right in the center of a bowl with some rice on top and a little bit of cilantro as garnish. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and please like and subscribe if you want more recipes.